Welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, and you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Kim and Mark, and today we have a special guest who is a restaurant owner and doer of many other things in the restaurant and wine world, Jen Ziskin, who is a local. Sometimes lately we've been talking to a lot of people from all over the world, all over the country, but it's nice to have somebody from Massachusetts on the show. How you doing, Jen?
I am great. So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I have known Jen for quite a few years through in and outs, just sort of bumping into each other at wine tastings all over the place. When you had your restaurant down here in our neck of the woods in Sherborne, I would go there all the time. So you are a very busy person in the wine and restaurant scene in the Boston area. You want to tell our listeners a little bit about what you do, what you're involved in?
Absolutely. So I definitely like to be busy. It's kind of my mantra. And I have been in the restaurant and wine world since I was 15. Always worked in restaurants really throughout life to kind of pay the bills. I loved working front of the house of restaurant. And then it wasn't until after I graduated college that I got back into restaurants on the management side. And then I kind of shifted and became a teacher for 7 years. I was teaching history and English at the Brookline Public Schools, had kids with my husband, Josh. And then when he decided it was time to open a restaurant and time to open Lamora, he pulled me back into the restaurant business. So that was 21 years ago, and I have not looked back since. We've done lots of travels. My love of wine started actually right after we got married. We lived in Italy for 6 months, and he worked at a restaurant and I was a nanny on a winery. So that's really where my love of wine started.
Before we pick your brain, Jen, on the restaurants and wine education, I want to talk to our listeners about the Mass Restaurants United. You're the executive director, correct?
Yes. So that's a new role for me. I just started the beginning of April as the executive director. And previous to that, I joined in 2023 on the board, and then soon after became the secretary on the executive committee. It's a grassroots organization, started during COVID in 2020 and has just grown. And now we are continuing to grow. And I'm their first part-time employee as executive director. It's a wonderful organization set out to advocate and inspire and assist independent restaurants of Massachusetts.
What are some of the functions it provides to restaurants that want help with liquor or wine or understanding that part of the industry? Is there education also involved with that?
Yes. And we actually are moving in a direction of even providing more education as we grow. In fact, have a fabulous webinar for those. There were lots of new liquor licenses given out in Massachusetts. And actually, MRU was instrumental in the advocacy for those liquor licenses to be distributed. And we have a webinar that will be led on really the ins and outs of the liquor licensing process, because it's quite intricate in Massachusetts. It's not easy to navigate. And all of the different aspects from creating a wine list, creating a liquor program, navigating the permitting, navigating insurance is something that we offer at MRU to our members.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things I wanted to ask you right away. There's been a lot in the Massachusetts news about changing restaurant licensing in the state. And I'm lucky enough to live in Franklin, and we have unlimited in-house licensing available that really no one takes advantage of. But in other parts of the state, it's limited to what the state gives out, correct? So can you give like a background of that and your experience with trying to get liquor license in restaurants?
Yes, I mean, one of the trickiest things is it's not just Massachusetts based, it's different in every town. So for example, where I had a restaurant in Sherborne for 9 years and then restaurants in Brookline, it's completely different, the different processes that we have to go through, applying for licenses and what the town actually allows you to do. So that's why it is really hard to navigate, and why, an organization like the MRU is really helpful to our members to provide some of that information. Like you said, in some towns, maybe there are unlimited licenses. In Boston, you have to buy a liquor license. They do not, distribute licenses. So they can be worth up to $450,000. And often when you're selling a restaurant, you're actually just selling your liquor license. It's a real asset.
It's always one of the, I think, big questions that I get from people who know that I'm in the industry, and we start talking about licenses, and the fact that it's different for every town and city kind of blows people's minds.
It is.
Like, why in the world is the system designed this way?
Right. And it's so hard. And it is why, it's something I'm really trying to also work with the Chamber of Commerce's across Massachusetts, so we can really help their members as well, and their restaurant members navigate. And they will have a little bit more background information on what are the requirements in each of their individual townships. But it would be great to have something a little bit more uniform.
So the MRU was started to help restaurants that struggled during COVID, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Is there if our listeners go to massrestaurantsunited.org, is there a list of participating restaurants that are in this group so people can support those restaurants?
Absolutely. We have a list of restaurants and it's on our website. We're actually revamping our website. So we'll be releasing a brand new website in a few months, which will be great. The list of restaurants, but also of our board. And it's not just restaurants that make up our board. We have people all across the industry who are advocating for restaurants, because it's really challenging, especially as an independent restaurateur, to run restaurants right now. And you need the support not only of your guests and people who come to your restaurants, but of your restaurant community as well. We found during COVID that one of the most powerful things is to support one another. And there was no way to create change without really not just being competitors, but being allies was so important. And I think that's really kind of the ethos of the MRU.
So Jen, let's now talk about your wine education. I know you have a lot of certifications and you did take the Italian specialist. Can you talk about the wine education you had taken? Which one of the certifications do you feel helped you the most in your restaurant world?
That's a really tough question, because I feel like because I have been really educating myself for so long and trying so many different programs, I really take something from each one of them, something valuable from each piece of instruction that I've taken. I think there is nothing more valuable than visiting the countries and visiting the vineyards and picking the grapes and watching it being made. So I think out of everything I've done, when I'm taken to a country, whether it's on a SOM trip or a press trip or an educator trip, that's where I really gain the most information from those trips.
You had said you had started in the restaurant industry at an early age. Were you exposed? I'm not saying you were drinking at that age, but were you exposed and interested in wine at that age, or did you develop that over time? Did you notice it early on?
Not really. I was not interested in wine, I would say, really until it piqued my interest when I was in Italy. That was kind of the first exposure that I had firsthand to see the grapes grown. We actually lived on a vineyard while we were over there, and to see the process. I would go time and time again to the same winery, bring guests every time. And every time I would go on the same tour and gain something new from each tour. And I loved that. I loved just kind of delving in and learning more. But I really don't feel like that piqued my interest till I was actually living there. And then it wasn't until we returned and I got back into the restaurant business and back into Lamora and started doing all the wine tastings, going out there trying to develop the wine list with the beverage director at the time. And that's really when I decided, okay, this is a passion for me. This is something I truly love. When I was growing up, I worked in restaurant. I worked in one really nice restaurant, but I was at first I was a busser and a food runner, and then I was a cocktail female waitress, but it was very cocktail heavy, not wine heavy at all. And then I worked in a really fast-paced seafood restaurant. I grew up in Plymouth. It was more about, I don't want to, I hate to say, but like the Kendall Jacksons and like the large manufactured wines that might be out there, the Yellowtail, wines like that were on the list. It really wasn't fine wine.
Was your ultimate goal going to these wine countries and taking the wine education to get into the restaurant industry? I know your husband is your partner in these restaurants, but was it for that, or was it you had the idea of starting a wine education business?
It was after we opened restaurants that really I decided to become more educated, because the Italian wine world is really hard to navigate, as you know, and it is so intricate. And I really wanted my wine list at Lamora to represent all the regions of Italy. It's an all Italian wine list. And I felt like another thing I really wanted was to have a personal connection with each of the wineries that were on the list. When we opened and we started to travel back to Italy and I would go to Vin Italy, my focus really was on building those relationships. I actually had taken a BU class just to really learn about all the wines of the world. And then I decided, what I really need to know is the Italian wine world. And then I decided to do the Italian wine specialist course, which we offered at Lamora, which really gave me the exposure to all the wines of Italy. But it was like little by little that my interest was piqued and what I wanted to learn grew, because it really wasn't until when we opened Heritage in 2015 and I started to get invited on more wine tours and more wine trips and brought to Italy, also brought to Argentina, different places, that I was like, I need more education. I'm around all these incredibly knowledgeable wine aficionados and wine professionals. And I decided I really need to have a little bit more background. So that's when I started delving into the certified sommelier and also WSET as well.
I wanted to ask you, you referenced your Plymouth upbringing and restaurants maybe with more commercial wine lists. How do you feel it is with a wine list at a restaurant that has maybe a lot of wines that your customers are unfamiliar with? Do you have a lot of challenges with getting people to kind of order those unusual grape varieties, regions, things like that?
Unfortunately, yes, because I have always really loved those smaller producers, smaller family run wineries that maybe aren't known to the masses. I did really struggle with that at Heritage. I think that we were lucky enough to really build a following, and our staff was really interested in learning about wine as well. So I think people delved outside of that world and they were excited to try new things, but it was hard. There were a lot of bottles that I have to admit did not move off the list. I think we had a unique situation there because we also had a wine shop and we could offer wine tastings every Friday night and Saturday. So people were able to try different wines. And then we had all of those wines over at the restaurant. So then they'd come in for dinner and they'd be like, oh yes, I remember having that at the store a few weeks ago, a month ago. So they were a little bit more adventurous. I struggle with it a little bit more at Punch Bowl. It's in a hotel, and I find that it is hard to sell the wine that maybe people aren't as familiar with. The Arinto, from Portugal is a little harder sell. I think it tends to sell because of the price point rather than the wine itself. So I do struggle with that, but I still haven't kind of shied away from offering really unusual wines on my list. I think it's important. But I think staff education is what's really important as well. And to make sure that you've offered them, I have wine descriptions for every single wine on our list, little stories as well. At Punch Bowl, I have an all-female wine list. So it's female owners, producers, vineyard managers, and winemakers that are on the list. And I have a picture of each one of them in this book that I have that's the staff has access to, with descriptions about all the wine and kind of a little story if I have a connection to the winery. And then at Lamora, we have an all-Italian wine list, which I mentioned. And it's also like lots of stories with each of the wines. I like to have some sort of connection with the winery, whether it's they've come to Lamora, to our restaurant to visit us and do a wine dinner, or whether I've traveled there or met them at Vin Italy or met them somewhere, in California, or had a special interaction with the winery. Each wine tells a story.
That seems to be the theme of this year and maybe last year too, was this connection between wine and stories and the people who are involved in growing the grapes, making the wine, kind of every facet of of wine production and that it's real people behind those bottles. And when you have that story that attaches to it, it makes it so much more meaningful for people.
I agree. I love learning the stories of the wine and telling them and retelling the stories. I think it makes the bottle so much more enjoyable.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio. You can find us on our website, thewww.wine. Today's special guest is Jen Ziskin. To find more information about Jen, you can go on the massrestaurantunited.org website, and her two restaurant websites are lamora.com and punchbowlbrookline.com. Welcome back. We're talking with Jen Ziskin. Jen, I just have a bunch of questions now I kind of want to work in about restaurant wine lists and wine protocol, because Kim and I cover most of these topics at one point on a show. First, I just wanted to ask, you have the two restaurants in Brookline, Lamora and Punch Bowl, which you talked about. Is there still a wine doggy bag option in restaurants?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is one of the best programs that was ever rolled out. And I love telling that to people, because if they go to order wine by the glass and they're both having the same wine, I always move them towards trying something by the bottle, even if it's something a little different, similar to what they're ordering. And then if they can't finish the bottle, they can always take it home. It's a very amazing program. And I don't know how people do it. I can always finish a bottle, but I think it's a great program to offer.
It's our superpower.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the protocol you have? Is it like when I sell a keg in retail, I have to put a Massachusetts tag, I have to register? Is it something you have to have certain bags and tags and labels or anything?
Yeah, you do have to have a certain bag, and it's a bag, has a seal on the inside. It's this plastic bag with a handle. You have to put the dinner receipt in the bag, and the wine has to be on that receipt and also has to be opened already. And there has to be food on the check as well. So they can't just buy the bottle of wine. They have to have food with it. And all that has to be in the bag.
Does the person have to put that in their trunk?
That's a good question. I do not know the answer to that.
I thought that was floating around at some time. So and the whole doggy bag thing, I loved it during COVID because I could get takeout wine from a restaurant. I think that helped the restaurants a lot during COVID, no?
It definitely did. But it's interesting as a retail, a retail liquor store owner and wine store owner that you do feel good about that, because there was a lot of pushback, because it did take away from some of the retail businesses. And now the law was just passed that we cannot sell unopened wine at the restaurant. We can sell cocktails to go, but not wine.
So can't the person just buy it, you open it and put it in a wine bag, doggy
as long
bag?
as they've also
Food.
had something to eat.
Yeah.
You have to, it could be something small, there's no,
Okay.
it could be just like a tiny little appetizer, but it has to be open. So,
But you can't get a takeout pizza and get the wine. You have to eat it there.
My understanding is you cannot, unless you are there, you open the wine has to be open too. And in the past, we were able to sell 2 bottles of wine. So this has to be 1 bottle of wine that, has already been open. And the cork is put back into it. So you cannot sell an unopened bottle of wine.
Okay.
And that would deter someone. I think they would rather, in my opinion, I know I'd rather, if I'm going to do takeout, I'd rather stop at a wine store and get a bottle of wine that hasn't been opened, as opposed to having it already open before I get home.
Yeah, I guess this way. I look at it as a wine geek, and even as a wine retailer, you have a specific list that you recommend for that wine, or you have something on your list as a story related to that food. I would want to take your suggestion.
And I would want to give it, and I would love to sell it to you. I do. It was very disappointing when that law changed. I wasn't as excited about the loss of that. It was very advantageous. The other thing we were doing, especially during COVID, we were having special wine dinners, and we were able to sell the wine that we would be then doing the takeout that paired with the dinner. So it was really fun to do that as well.
Yeah, I never thought of that part. That's actually a good thing. That would be a good thing for the restaurants.
Oh, absolutely. It was great. We even did webinars and Zooms with the winemakers. So they would be in Italy. The person would be home with their meal, with their wine, and tasting with the winemaker from Italy.
Nice.
So COVID did introduce, there were some positives, way too many negatives, but there were a few positives that came out of it.
Well, the other thing I want to talk about was the BYOB standard in a restaurant. What is your policy if someone says, I want to bring in a bottle to Lemoore and I want you to serve it for me? What's your policy on that? What are your feelings on if people want to bring their own bottle in?
Well, unfortunately, it's a state law, so you can't. If you have a liquor license to serve wine and liquor, you are not allowed to let people bring in their own wine. So it makes it really easy to say no because it's against the law. If you do not have a liquor license, you can be BYOB and you can charge a corkage fee. So I know we have a great restaurant in our town in Needham, Sweet Basil. And when he did an expansion, he had the opportunity to have a liquor license and he decided not to. So that's a fun place. If I want to bring a special bottle of wine, I go to Sweet Basil. But unfortunately, if you're a restaurant and you have a liquor license, you can't allow people to bring in wine.
Was that something that changed? Because wasn't there something where a restaurant I can have my own wine locker, correct? That you store the wine for me that I want you to serve me.
I'm pretty sure I've never done a ton of research on this, but I'm pretty sure you buy that wine off their list and they might be able to give you a special price. I don't know if you're necessarily paying the markup of a restaurant price, but I don't think you can bring in wine of your own. And I peek at lockers too, and it doesn't look like there's like old vintage wine in a lot of those lockers. But again, the restaurants have access to that, so they could purchase it as long as it comes through a distributor. Because we have the 3-tier system in Massachusetts, they can't bring in a wine if they have a liquor license. Not sure everybody follows the rules and the law, but
I'm sure there's things around that. Because I've seen some restaurants that have wine that has a corkage fee thing on the menu. So I don't know if that was just something old but in this state, you never know.
I know. And I'm not sure. I've never seen that to be true. I know in other states it is. And I love it. Like when we're in California, it's a great feature to be able to bring in wine.
So next, Jen, I want to ask you about promoting wine in restaurants. You touched base on a few things. One of the things I notice when I go out to restaurants is that there's not much wine being promoted or pushed. And you said you approach it different. You put in the stories and putting together educational materials for your servers to promote the wine. But why are more restaurants not putting things like that on a menu? Like you're going to have this steak, we suggest this Cabernet, or put those little table talk sellers on the tables to promote wine more. Isn't it still a good revenue generator for a restaurant?
It is. I think it would be, just as a restaurant owner and a small restaurant, it would be my expectation. I'd rather have, it's like why you wouldn't have a name tag on a server like Jen. You want that to be kind of more cohesive. Like you just want it to be a more like symbiotic relationship. The server comes over to the table, they get to know the guest. They want, they take the order. They want to tell them a little bit about the wine list, tell them about stories. What do you like to drink? You want to have a more personal interaction. And I think that it's not that we're not promoting the wine by not having table talkers. It's you want that more personal relationship with the guest and with the server.
So the next thing to ask you is about creating and selecting wines for your list. And as a wine buyer in retail, like you, I taste a lot of wines and I'm always thinking, where can it go on my shelf? Who can I present this to and how can I sell it? So my question to you is, when you are selecting wines or tasting wines, have you ever tasted a wine that you absolutely loved but felt you just could not sell it on your list because it didn't pair with the food or for some other reason?
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, there's a lot of wine out there that I love that others might not, or that, like you said, whether it's, I don't know if it's necessarily a wine pairing, but just can be a very difficult sell. I think one thing that you said that really sparked my interest, though, is that when I am tasting wine, I'm often thinking about our guests and our regular guests who would love that particular wine. So I think it's a little bit the opposite. I'm like, oh my God, Ashley would love this wine when she comes in. Like she would definitely want to order this. So I sometimes do purchase wine, even if it's just for one guest, and I know I can hook one person into buying that bottle. It would be worth it to me.
It kind of comes back to that personal connection. I love that idea that you've got like special people in mind that come to your restaurant on such a regular basis that you're like, yes, I'm going to get this wine for you.
Right, exactly. And it is also getting, especially at Lemoore, getting the staff excited about the wine. And I find they they are all superstars with that. They're able to taste the wine. A lot of times when I'm doing the wine tastings, either with the winemaker themselves, I make sure that the bartender's there, the servers are there, so they can taste the wine as well and get excited about it. Because they're the ones really selling it on a day-to-day basis.
When you mentioned about the doggy bags, that you like the idea the customer can maybe try a few different wines and feel comfortable they can take it home. They don't have to drink it all. I wanted to ask you about the trends with half bottles and magnum bottles. I always see that magnums are popular in restaurants, but I rarely see them offered anywhere. And my preference a lot of times is a half bottle when I go to restaurants, because I might want to try 3 half bottles instead of 3 full bottles. So I'd like to get your feedback on half bottles and magnum bottles for wine lists.
I love them. I wish I could sell more, and I wish I had an even better program using them, because first of all, I think half bottles are fabulous. Like you said, it is fun to be able to try different types of wine. I love starting with a half bottle of white and then moving to a full bottle of red. I feel like that's just enough. Better than having, 2 large bottles of wine at one meal. So I think they're great to offer. I don't feel like even the distributors promote them enough with the half bottles. So sometimes I have to ask, oh, does that come in a half bottle? Because I really think that they're a fabulous sell to have on the list. As far as magnums, I've definitely had a harder time selling magnums than just regular multiple bottles of wine. I wish I had less of a hard time with them. I don't know if it's sometimes the sticker shock that people get, even though they would probably buy 2-3 bottles without blinking an eye when they kind of see the sticker shock on some of the higher end magnums, that maybe it sways them. I used to have a really great program at Lamora, and I really should pick this up again. I called it Wine Wednesdays. I would have a magnum of wine and I would pour it by the glass, and I would get support from the distributors as well. They would give me a little discount on the bottle, so I could offer it by the glass at not an exorbitant price. And that was a great way to introduce people to magnums and introduce them to something a little different that they wouldn't necessarily have. So I should bring that back. That was a lot of fun. I would always take a picture too of the bottle, and we would finish it.
There's something so impressive about a really big bottle of wine too.
Exactly. And it's really fun to pour, and also fun to talk about and go around to the tables and be able to pour it at the table. I used to really love that.
It's interesting though, because I see that trend on the retail side where, the 1.5 size bottles now are not as popular as I think they used to be in wine retail. So the real big ones, whenever I get specials, I think at the holiday, someone would want to get these for the holidays. That trend seems to be going down a little bit on the retail side. So it's kind of interesting to hear your side of it.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I know. I think they're great. I love doing magnums. We have a holiday party every year for our book group at home. And I love having a magnum at the table because I think they, like you said, they look impressive. They're really fun to pour. And, and I think they taste great too. It's a great expression of the wine as well.
And I'm with Mark on the half bottle thing, or with you on the half bottle thing too, having your first half bottle and then something else to go with whatever your next course is going to be.
Exactly.
One of the things Kim and I think, Kim, we've probably done a few shows on selecting wines on a restaurant list and how they always say, go with the second least expensive is the best value. And I'd like you, Jen, to give our listeners some tips on selecting wines on a restaurant list. Is there truth to the second least expensive bottle on the list is the best value?
It's funny. I haven't heard that. I always feel like kind of my major trick, and I carry it when I'm a diner, and I also teach it a lot when I'm talking about wine etiquette and talking to, interns about ordering wine when they go out to business dinners, is I feel like if you're going to order wines by the glass, great, have a wine by the glass. You should always choose from that list, but try not to order a wine that's offered by the glass. Try not to order that by the bottle, because you would get a better value from a wine that's the same price by the bottle as that wine by the glass. It's going to be, probably a better wine because of the way we price our wines by the glass and wines by the bottle on a wine list. So it's a little math you have to do to figure that out. But you are getting a better value, let's say, with a $40 bottle of wine that is not served by the glass. That's actually a more expensive wine at cost than a $40 bottle of wine that is served by the glass. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm glad you talked about the wine by the glass because do you have any wine preservation systems that you use to serve those? And if you don't, how do you make sure that the quality of those wine by the glass wines are always up to par?
Yeah, so we have both. So we do pump our wine. So we do pump the wine every night. And then the other thing that they do, the bartender tastes the wines every day to make sure that they are still okay. They date the wine as well when they open it. So they know how many days it's been open. And really with our red wine, it's 1 or 2 days. They try not to have it open, maybe I would say probably too much longer than that. But that's with the pumping system. We also have Coravin we use for our high end wine. Like we have a Barolo by the glass. So we use a Coravin to open that. In the past, we had a Franciacorta by the glass, and that also had a special, forget what it was called. We're not using it right now, but it was something also that would preserve that longer by having that system in place that we were able to pour that by the glass as well. So all of those things help. And it is nicer to be able to offer some more expensive wines by the glass with the Coravin.
What is the etiquette in a restaurant on there's a wine by the glass I've never had or something I want to try? Is that something that's proper etiquette?
It's one of my favorite things. And I know our staff loves it. I'll see so many comments come back from Resi because we use Resi and then you get automatic comments from the guests we had the most fabulous Italian wine tasting last night with your wines by the glass. And it just makes me smile every time I read it because it means that the bartender or the server poured them a couple little glasses, a couple little tastes before they chose the actual glass that they wanted to have. And I think that it's just such a fun experience for people. So I think it's great. I have no problem when someone asks me to try, a glass, especially that we offer it by the glass. I wish I could open every bottle so they could try that first. If I sell someone on a bottle of wine and they're like, oh, I don't know, and they're hemming and hawing, I'll say, if you don't like it, don't worry. We will drink it later, or we can offer it by the glass. So feel free to send it back. And they always love it. So.
I was going to say with the, giving people a taste with your wine by the glass program, especially for wines that might be a little bit more outside of people's comfort zones, not the usual thing that they might order. That's brilliant.
It's great. No,
and it makes people feel
really
so comfortable too.
It does. Yes. And then they learn something too. Yep. I love doing that. And I also like if somebody wants to come in and do a little mini wine tasting with the wines we have by the glass. I love doing that and telling them the little stories with the wine as well.
What do you see in the industry as far as wine corkage rates? We always hear it's between 2 and 7% of every corked bottle is defective because of this bacteria. But in retail, the return rate is very low. I'm just curious if you're seeing low rates of corked wines in the restaurants.
I'm seeing way lower, especially Italian wine. Way lower corkage. Or corked wine. They are going through like a lot of hoops buying special corks that are guaranteed. So they don't have those issues. So I'm definitely seeing way fewer than I did when we first opened. So I think that's a positive. It's a certain cork. I can't think of the name of it. It's like Diem, maybe.
Yeah.
That they're using. And, and I think that's pretty much guaranteed not to be corked. But so I'm definitely seeing a decrease. And I think it seems that if people are sending a wine back, it's more about them not enjoying it than it being corked. And that for us is fine because then we can pour it by the glass and we're able to resell it. So it's usually not an issue.
There's a lot trending lately in the liquor industry about low alcohol, no alcohol wines and even liquors. Have you addressed that in any way in your restaurants?
Well, I had to write my paper on it for diploma. No alcohol wine. Yes. So I did get to learn a lot about it. And the biggest takeaway that I had from that was it's really expensive to make. So you're not going to get a bargain with low and no alcohol wine. But we definitely see a trend, I think, for health benefits, or even like my in-laws, like my father-in-law, all of a sudden wasn't able to drink wine anymore. So we started to bring in, no alcohol wine just for him. And other people are definitely jumping right in. A lot of mocktails too. People are ordering those. There's definitely definitely a trend with the younger generation, as you know, we read about all the time, that they're drinking less, and they might still have wine, but they'll have like one non-alcoholic wine and then or a mocktail and then move to wine, but trying to have wine that's a little less alcohol. I think that's definitely the trend right now.
Are you excited that Italy is finally opened up to allowing more production and may change? You might see a non-alcoholic Barolo or something out there soon.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't met a lot of non-alcoholic wine that I've fallen in love with. I do have to admit, I think it's really hard to maintain and to maintain the true character of the wine. But I'd be excited to see if this trend perhaps does develop and the tastes are similar. I think it's, it is exciting. But I also get disappointed that people aren't going to have the same enjoyment about wine and that I experienced over my lifetime. I'm not sure this is a trend that will continue. I think, we often go through these different trends. There's ups and downs, and I see a shift and eventually hope that people will get back into more normal consumption. Obviously not overconsumption, but normal consumption of alcohol, I think, is very healthy.
Jen, you offer some private wine tasting experiences that you want to tell our listeners you offer for that?
Yeah, so I've been doing, and it's been really exciting for me. I started because my kids are now of the drinking age, and they've always been really interested in wine. And some of their friends would say to me, or my friends' kids, I know nothing about wine. I want to learn about wine. I'm going into the professional world. I'm going to get a job in finance. I need to know about wine. So I started doing these classes for my friends' kids and for my kids and their friends, and then offering them different companies to their interns to really like an intro to wine, but not just like the very basics, but also delving into what are you looking for when you're looking at a wine list? When you go out to dinner, what's some of the etiquette around ordering wine and, how to order wine when you go to a restaurant or you go over to your friend's house and their parents offer you wine. What do they mean when they say, would you like Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc? Because it can be as basic as that they have no idea. And I thought that these classes were going to be super quick, like 45 minutes. I had one class that was like 2.5 hours long because they kept asking me a million questions. They wanted to know not just tasting wine, but just like, how is wine made and why is this wine different? And it was amazing, like their curiosity around it. And because I was a teacher before we opened Lamora for 7 years, I love it. I love getting back in that kind of classroom setting as well. And then talking about something as passionate as I am about wine is really fun. So I've been loving doing those. And then I also do a nonprofit presentation. They wanted to do a little something, just a little something different for their donors. So talked a little bit about my travels to Italy, and then with the wines that I was tasting them on, a little bit about the taste, but also about the story and the stories behind each of the wine that we were presenting. And that's been a lot of fun too.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for your time and all the feedback on the restaurants. I always have all these questions. Kim knows I like to ask weird things, and
he's like you've been saving up questions.
You're
I
the
love
perfect guest to ask these things too. And I hope our listeners check out your restaurants, lamora.com and punchbowlbrookline.com, and more information about the Mass Restaurants United at massrestaurantsunited.org. Thank you very much, Jen. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you for listening today to The Wonderful World of Wine. We have been your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, with our special guest, Jen Ziskin. You can find our past episodes on SoundCloud and iTunes. You can send us your questions and comments onto our Facebook page, and you can visit our website, thewww.wine. Cheers.
Cheers.